everybody. This is Deborah Cat from Deborah Cat Coaching, and you are listening to the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship so that you can become a master lover. And we hope to inspire love and better sex worldwide. Today, I am delighted to have Andre, Lazarus, and Suzannah Rose as my guests. They have been coaches and healers for over 10 years, bringing a unique and open perspective to relationship dynamics and helping others to expand their capacity of understanding in what's possible. With a combined 16 years of experience in non-consensual monogamous dynamics, they bring their lessons and tools learned over the years of navigating open relationship dynamics to a brand new, fully loaded online class coming soon. So I am so delighted to have you both here, and I'm going to start with you, Suzannah. How did you get here?
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that introduction. And I want to share that we are in a totally consensual, I think when you mentioned it, said non-consensual monogamy. So
Oops.
Totally consensual non-monogamous relationship.
It's a mouthful.
Which is fascinating because realizing that the word non, if we put it in the wrong place, suddenly the whole thing just changes.
Yeah.
So how I got here. Well, if you asked 8-year-old me when I was younger, if I would be on a Better Sex podcast talking about consensual non-monogamy, you probably would have received a very stern look from an 8-year-old and been like, oh, absolutely not. I will be running for Congress or doing something in politics, which completely shifted when I met this beautiful being, Andre, who is my partner in life and in many lifetimes, I would say. I started my professional journey as a Marine. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years after graduating from the Naval Academy. And then I joined a very traditional world. I mean, I was very structured in being a Marine, of watching my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, everyone around me was in these really traditional relationships, in traditional sort of Protestant living. And all of this, I think, actually made me feel a little suffocated. And as soon as I was given a little bit of freedom after leaving the military and also divorcing, I went through a pretty intense divorce with my husband as I was leaving the military. That breakdown of everything that I thought I was supposed to be, everything that I thought that was going to make me happy and didn't make me happy, caused me to really shift the way that I saw the world. And I always knew that I was I was sexually attracted to different people, like different types of people. I consider myself multisexual. And even in my marriage, I felt that way. So I think that when I met Andre in Afghanistan, of all places, that we both bonded over our sort of non-traditional interests. And then when our traditional relationships broke apart, I started to piece myself back together. And really, I call it like a self-disillusion process. And then here I am today, helping other people and letting them know that they don't have to try to fit a square peg into a round hole over and over and over again, like I did.
Thank you for that. I've got so many questions, but I want to open the floor up for just a minute to ask the same question of you, Andre. How did you get here?
Man, it's hard to follow this lovely lady, and she put it so eloquently, as at least where we joined in our journey. But how did I get here? Um, my my life, I've always felt to be a bit unique in how I looked at relationships, how I looked at love. I had many different girlfriends when I was younger. When you're 5 or 6 years old, you have like 10, 15 girlfriends. Everyone's your girlfriend. But then it seemed to like continue to stick as far as like how much I desired connecting with more than one person. And so I realized from an early age, the way that I love and see love has always been quite unique and interesting. And fast forward a little bit into my life, similar to Suzannah, my professional life, I actually met Suzannah in Afghanistan. We were both Marines, and we met during a time of war, and which means I feel like we've been forged in fire ever since we've met. And we were both married. I was married as well. And we both bonded over the love that we had for our spouses. And coming back where both of our relationships, unfortunately, were transitioning and ended, we decided that we didn't want the next phase of our life, the way that we looked at relationships, to be the same. We decided that we were going to look at a new way of relationship building and dynamics. And that's kind of where all of that started. Again, more than 8 years later, here we are looking at and really learning about how to bring our knowledge of consensual non-monogamy to the world, where there's so many ways that you can look at a relationship. And we just feel very blessed to have learned and also made the mistakes so that people can learn from our mistakes and realize that they're not alone in navigating this beautiful world.
I love your story. So first of all, I have to say, it's super hot that you guys were Marines and then in times of war, like that. I find that to be a hot beginning. Now that I've said that out loud. So
Thank you.
We've talked, the word not consensual non-monogamy, we've kind of thrown it out there as if everybody knows what it is. So I'm wondering if you could take a moment to really break it down in, what it means and what it looks like to live that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And Susanna can jump in as well. But the way that I view, and first, the definition that I'm about to share is my definition. And a lot of the terms and terminology that we use as we talk with you today, Deborah, are, from our experience, from our research, but there is no one definition to say that this is what an open relationship is. This is what consensual non-monogamy is. So with all that you're going to be hearing, it's the perspective of Suzannah and I, but your definition might be different. So for me, consensual non-monogamy means you are in some form of dynamic in a relationship where you and a partner or multiple partners have decided to consent that there is the ability to share emotional, physical, spiritual connection, energy with more than just one person, which makes it that consensual piece that you've talked about it, that you've agreed to it. And the non-monogamous is now is beyond just that one person, whether it be your primary or it could be multiple individuals. But really, consensual non-monogamy is the umbrella term that I see it as the fundamental way of looking at an open relationship. And polyamory, swinging, lifestyle, all of these different terms kind of fit under what is the umbrella of consensual non-monogamy. What do you think? Does that fair?
Yeah. Yes. And I think the only thing I would add, I think that was a beautiful description. And something I would highlight is that it can be, like he said, emotional, physical, or spiritual. It's all these different levels, right? It doesn't have to be just physical, which is what we often think of when we think of non-monogamy. And there are other terms for it as well, which we can talk perhaps more about. But ethical non-monogamy is another way of describing it. And they're similar, but slightly different, right? Like ethical doesn't have as much of a relational attitude. That's why we say consensual, because it requires the consent of both people, and everyone's ethics are a little different. Open relationships, polyamory, there's all these different terms. We consider ourselves consensually non-monogamous and in an open relationship at this point in our journey.
So it's fascinating because it's like the word consensual or ethical before non-monogamy, it seems to be not necessarily, it seems to be a fairly new addition to the non-monogamy world. And, you know, I really appreciate the idea that you're bringing forward around the idea that like everyone involved is informed, and that seems very different than what I often see is sort of this like, well, we're not actually talking about it, but there's, you know, I'm texting someone on the side, or I'm doing this and that and the other thing on the side. And so I really appreciate the bringing forward of the, you know, the agreement piece of it. And I know for, you know, in talking to people, one of their biggest fears around any kind of non-monogamy is jealousy. And I know that's a topic that you is near and dear to your heart. And so I'd love if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we'd love to. And before we do, I just wanted to say that what you're speaking on and, you know, just identifying around the consensual piece is very important, because while the dynamic that Suzanne and I had just described, again, in the definition and how we have our relationship, you know, that works for us, but that might not work for everyone. And part of your dynamic in your relationship might be that there is non-monogamy taking place, but part of that is that it is kind of an unspoken agreement or something that you don't really want to talk about, or there's just not that comfort level or desire. And we want to make sure that we celebrate all forms of relationships and all forms of dynamics. And some people, you know, there's plenty of cultures, especially European cultures, where the non-monogamy piece isn't spoken about, but it's just kind of assumed that it's happening. So we also very much appreciate that for the consensual piece of talking about it, but just know that if that's not what you're doing in your relationship, that's okay as well. There's elements of bringing in the consensual piece and the consent and the talking that can really elevate the relationship to new heights when and if you're ready to do so. So I just wanted to make sure I commented on that. And then jealousy, has been very, very much something that we both have had our time with, and we both see jealousy and have it sitting with our individual selves differently. So I'm wondering, Susanna, like when talking about jealousy, which we do in our course quite often, how do you see it being so integral to the process of opening a relationship and understanding oneself?
Jealousy. I could talk about this for days. I know jealousy inside and out, and it knows me. And I want to say to your listeners, like, it's okay to be jealous, first and foremost.
100%.
Totally okay to be jealous. And the more that we avoid jealousy and we push it away, or we think like, oh, I'm not actually feeling jealous, and we hide it, the more we actually don't process what's happening. And so for me, jealousy is also like the first question that people always ask. Yeah. When we tell them that we're consensually non-monogamous, they're like, oh, I could never do that. I would get so jealous. And I actually appreciate that there are people who know that about themselves, but also when there is a cultural norm that like jealousy is supposed to happen in relationships. And in my opinion, jealousy is the result of us having unhealthy attachment styles with one another, which are often brought on by different attachment styles. So like Andre is avoidant attachment most of the time, and I am typically anxious attached. So I tend to get jealous. But I remember to this day, I know my father gets jealous of my mother, and it was very normalized in our family of like, that's just the way it's supposed to be. And I think that it should be normalized that we have it, but it also is important for us to ask when we feel jealous, what am I actually feeling here and what's being triggered, and move through that feeling and not to put it on the other person. Yeah. And kind of blame it on them. And once we move through jealousy, the ability to really connect with your partner on like a deeper soul level is unlimited. And I think jealousy is sort of like almost like a gatekeeper to that like deep connection. And if you can move through that, the level of connection you'll find is like, it's juicy. Yeah. I want to piggyback off that, because that was so beautifully said, that jealousy is, again, completely okay. It's part of, I believe, who we are as beings, to want to know that there's some form of assurance that our place in a relationship is secure or solidified. And then when we don't feel that, when we feel threatened, that's generally that jealousy of like, is this other person going to replace me? Is this other person better in bed than me, better looking, just better than what I can provide my partner? And that goes to that part of the, what can be considered unhealthy attachment styles, because now it's the fear of, if I don't stand up for myself or this jealous feeling I'm having, I'm going to lose my partner. So I really feel when we can integrate and be able to understand the jealousy rather than like pushing it aside or allowing it to overtake us, that's when we can really start to connect better and deeper with our partner. So you've already said a lot, and I just want to make sure that we have, that we break it down just a little slower. So first of all, one of the things that I really heard is this idea that jealousy is really normalized. In fact, as you were speaking about your, it being normalized, I'm like, oh, not only is it normalized, it's actually kind of celebrated in in a strange way. Like, I feel like there's often, oh, he's jealous. That means, and then we make meaning about what that means when our partner is jealous, or if we make them jealous, or, any of those behaviors. That's so right, Deborah. I think recently I've been I watch like romantic comedies, and I've been hyper aware of the normalizing behaviors that we are promoting in these movies. And I actually don't recommend doing this because it takes all of the goodness out of the romantic movies. But what you're saying is something that is actually very common, is when someone is jealous, it's like, oh, that means they love you a lot. That means that like you're theirs and they kind of own you.
Possession.
It's like a possessive kind of thing. And so I think we have absolutely normalized jealousy in that way. And if we could really recognize the jealousy and not necessarily demonize it and say it's a bad thing, but say, hey, this is a little bit of a red flag, and maybe this is something for both of us to explore.
Nice. I also just wanted to, make sure that people understand when you talk about attachment styles, what you're talking about. And then if you could just talk a little bit more about the two different styles that you and Andre are, and how those interact together.
So the two different styles that we're talking about that Suzannah mentioned, myself being more of the avoidant attachment and her being more of the anxious attachment. So what that really means is that for avoidant attachment, you really focus on the individual, yourself, freedom to be able to express yourself. You put individuation and the desire to be curious at the forefront of what is the relationship. So meaning that if I'm feeling a little bit like I'm cornered or not being able to be celebrated for the amazing person that I am, this is my story, then I feel cornered and I want to like break free. But until then, I'm going to kind of maybe avoid tough conversations. And then if you want to talk about anxious,
I would say avoidant even has that like trapped feeling
trapped
associated with it, and a desire to be sovereign, a desire to be individual. And then the anxious attached person will typically be focusing very heavily on the love bond. And I actually really like taking these two words, so anxious and avoidant, and really likening them to the avoidant is prioritizing the individuation, and the anxious is prioritizing the love bond, because then that helps us to understand what the priorities of those people are. And in an anxious attachment, it's typically like, I need to be in a partnership with this person, so I'm going to do anything I can to make sure that the partnership stays, because I don't necessarily prioritize my individuation as much. I prioritize the partnership and the love bond and those things. And of course, every relationship is going to look different on how you embody those two polarities, but they're often like the feminine can prioritize the love bond, while the masculine can prioritize the avoidant individuator.
And then to your question is, how does that integrate, or how does that work in our connection, being avoidant and anxious? It's fiery. It's super fiery.
Can be sexy.
It can be extremely sexy.
Yeah.
It comes with its challenges around communication, like times when I kind of want to just allow things to possibly sit and ruminate. Suzannah might want to try to like solve the issue in the moment, and not that one way is better or worse or right or wrong, but generally with different attachment styles like avoidant and anxious, it's usually communication is where you're going to run into certain challenges, because someone might want to talk more about something, and someone might want to just have some space to let things process. So that's, I think, the most relevant to our relationship, and where we have seen just some challenges that have popped up over the years, and we've learned a lot about that.
I would add one thing to that, which is that often anxious and avoidant tend to attract each other. And so because they are sort of these two ends of the polarity, so like magnets, we attract each other. And really our goal is to get to a place of secure attachment. That's really like the third attachment style, is to understand our tendencies and then get to that place. And you can also be a different style of attachment in different relationships. So I have been avoidant in past relationships when the other person was more anxious, and vice versa. So you're not necessarily going to stay one attachment style. It just depends on the connection you're in at that time.
And I'm curious, you'd mentioned, I'm curious at what tools you use to help come together with these different styles of communication.
Yeah, I feel like, Deborah, you teed that up perfectly, because almost as if we rehearsed it, and we actually did not. But yeah, there's a lot of different tools that we use, and a lot of these tools are actually exercises that we bring into the course. Our course is Open to More: How to Navigate Consensual Non-Monogamy, and there'll be more information on that. But some of the tools that we use is really about coming together, coming closer to the partner, and sharing the tough conversations. Is, for instance, one of the tools that we do to understand and integrate jealousy is we will, rather than stay in a space where we feel like is a usual space, like a home or a car that we know, we will go for a walk. We'll go out into nature. We'll move our body. We'll have openness rather than feeling confined. And we will go back and forth, and we'll share about, if one of us is feeling jealousy, we'll share that, but we'll also make sure to be very self-aware to say that I know that this is not yours. This is mine. This is the jealousy that I'm feeling. And I wanted to share this with you, that this was coming up for me, and allowing the other partner, allowing that person to get those words out, and not so much always trying to solve, but just listen and just hold space. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I love that one, because I think when we get out into spaces that are like a little bit unfamiliar, then some of the roles drop away. And especially for a woman living in this world, there are particular roles that we put on ourselves, or we feel are placed on ourselves. And I think the same thing for men. And so being able to move out into other spaces helps us be more free with our ideas. And a lot of the other tools that we love using in our relationship are ones that help to make and cultivate safety, and to help us feel really safe with each other. So in between the moments of fire, because we are fiery people, we have a really beautiful partner intimacy share ritual that we do. We do one where we do a joining ritual where we say particular words that help the other person recognize how much we honor them. And then, of course, for us, physical touch is really important. So we cuddle a lot.
Yeah, a lot of embracing.
Yes.
A lot of shared breathing. I'm a touch person when it comes to love languages, both giving and receiving. That's my number one love language. So understanding also your partner and what they are what their primary love language is also important, so that you're getting an idea of how to best connect with your partner, because it might not be the same. And they might want to talk more. They might want more quality time or an act of service when it comes to the jealousy. So there's a lot of different tools that we incorporate, and we do this. And this is the thing that sometimes people are like, oh, you really schedule that? We schedule these things. Yep. We put it on our calendar, because the calendar is our life. And we put it on the calendar and we say, hey, once a month during this time, we're going to go for a walk. Or once a month during this time, we're going to do this ritual. Mm-hmm. We even schedule sex sometimes because we're so busy. And there's this idea that it takes away the spontaneity. In some aspects, I could understand that, but just because you've scheduled sex doesn't mean you're scheduling the same type of sex. It could be sex where there's no touching of genitals. It could be a sexual act where one of us is the top and the other is the bottom, and we're just being tied up or flogged. And so really the idea around these rituals is scheduling them whichever way feels good for you, but making sure that you find some way to stick with them on a consistent basis, so that you're creating those rituals for yourself.
Wow. So what I'm really hearing, and, I'm just going to put this in my words, that you're really creating relationship as a practice.
I love that. It's almost experimental. Yeah. The way that we have looked at our relationship together, the way that we bond and connect both physically, emotionally with other friends and lovers is very much in a way experimental, because until you've actually been able to live it or practice it, how can you really speak about it? How can anyone ever say, oh, non-monogamy doesn't work if all you've done is, monogamy in your life? Or how can you say, oh, for instance, a BDSM is just dark and shadowy and there's no beauty in it if you've never actually gone to a play space or a dungeon and allowed yourself to surrender to the moment. So yes, practice for sure, but really we're explorers. We like to really explore the unknown, and everyone's a bit different, but we like to take ourselves into an uncomfort zone as often as we can, because for us, it allows us to really know what those edges are and where we want to either run up to that edge and create a boundary or possibly go beyond that.
And I offer that I really love that phrase, Deborah, ritual or relationship as a practice. And there's something also about ritual that's important. But what we're doing is we're going out into the great unknown, exploring, and then bringing back the juiciest, the most effective, the best practices that we have found, because we've explored hundreds of different types of circumstances and rituals. And these are the ones that have really made an impact in our relationship. And we know it will do the same in others.
Mm-hmm. So I have one really specific question here. Mm-hmm. And that is, I know for myself, encountering as a non-monogamous person, one of the most tricky places is when my partner comes home from an experience. Like, that's the place where I can be most jealously triggered. And I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom there.
Yeah. Well,
it's a great question.
I'll let Susannah go first, and then I'll follow up because I've got something else.
Totally. And I think Deborah, correct me if this doesn't sound like you, but for me, it's like when they're gone, all of the possible shadowy things that are telling me that our relationship isn't going to work are coming up. and I'm thinking about how much I'm comparing myself to this other person. And I'm thinking like, maybe he's just never going to come home. And, and I'm like, oh, what are they doing? What is he getting from this person that he's not getting from me? How could, why does he even need that kind of thing? And all of those thoughts come up in my head. So, then when he does return home from an experience like that, I have to remind myself that that was my experience and it wasn't him like actually living that out. And I was creating a whole story of what could possibly happen in the worst possible way. And some of those feelings then bubble up and he comes home and I'm like really avoidant, or I'm like particularly snippy, and he's like WTF, like I just had a great time, and what have you been doing stewing down here? So that is such a real thing. And I would offer that it is, once again, it is okay to feel those things. And I think what has helped me the most is me learning how to hold my inner child, which many of us know what the inner child is, but the inner child to me is, she's about 8 years old and she's very bossy and tells me that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not going to have enough friends or be loved. And so when I spend more time with her and mothering her and also loving her when her fears start to come up, and recognizing that those are not necessarily my adult fears in this moment, that is when I can recognize that the jealousy I'm feeling or the anxiety I'm feeling is not necessarily real. It's a story, or it's a memory of a pattern of being abandoned in the past, and that I have way more tools now as an adult to get through it.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to honor and thank you for sharing that and giving that perspective and seeing the growth that you've also come from in the begining of our exploration.
Oh, so. I was about to cut somebody. So, I am a warrior at heart.
She is a warrior. And
I want to pause you there, because I'm so curious, like if those are the feelings, and that what was it that made you just really say to yourself, yes, there's this part of me and still I want more or different?
I think the fact that I knew that I actually was not fully even monogamous with my ex-husband, not necessarily in a consensual way, certainly not emotionally, and that the pattern of all of my previous relationships had always been for me to be either really avoidant and non-committal, or to just want multiple relationships at the same time. I was like, this is real for me. Like, I really do want this freedom and this ability to explore. And I sometimes think to myself, what's the alternative? I start to think about being in a monogamous relationship. And I think that to me sounds actually so much worse than being triggered by the jealousy or being triggered by these difficult feelings. I'd rather move through those tough feelings than move through the feelings of feeling stifled or trapped. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit like pick your poison, but also the benefits that the joy that I feel and the abundance and the connection I feel in a consensually non-monogamous relationship, in the really beautiful moments, is so much more full than the moments I ever had in my monogamous relationship. And I think I have that because I had a monogamous relationship to compare it to. So I do think that the comparison is helpful for me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh my God. I cannot believe how quickly the time has passed. I am going to just, the last question is for you, Andre, and that is, if there's one thing you want people to get from our conversation here today, what might that be?
I think the one thing is that you are not alone. You are not alone in whatever you are feeling, whether it be a monogamous relationship that's having its challenges, a consensual non-monogamous relationship that's having its challenges, that there is someone or someone's multiple out there who are also having those same feelings or questions. So to always know that there are resources out there, whether it be family, friends, lovers, courses, going online and looking at people who've been talking about this, coming to your podcast, Deborah, and finding out ways to work through the challenges rather than seeing a challenge as I'm having a trouble in this relationship. This means that it's not supposed to work. This means that it's going to end. And then now you end it, going to the next relationship, like assuming that now that's going to change or shift your perspective on what that challenge will be with this new person. And generally it just follows you. So just knowing you're not alone and reaching out and educating yourself, educating your partner, working together to navigate those tough moments. Because if you can make it through a tough moment, you're going to have so many more beautiful moments. It's math, but if you expect every time you have a tough moment that's a reason to leave the relationship to find the next one to hope that there won't be any tough moments, you're just going to continue to run into those moments. So that's my takeaway.
Oh, I love that. Well, so thank you so much, Andre and Susana. We've been having a great conversation about consensual non-monogamy. And please check out the upcoming online course. The links are in the show notes. And also you can find out more about them, both online and in person. And I just want to say again, a big thank you, deep gratitude. And for those of you who are listening, if you want to do your part in spreading better sex and love around the world, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to a podcast.